I spent 29 years building something they now pretend I never touched. My name is Daniel Kessler. I'm 58 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I was the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Development at Halcyon Systems, a tech firm that used to believe in long games and steady hands. I joined when I was 29. Back then, our server room had a bucket for leaks, and I ran meetings with an overhead projector. I stayed when others left. I helped turn Halcyon into a global solutions provider with 3 verticals and a billion-dollar valuation. And yesterday, the CEO told me I was better suited for the past. He said it like he was doing me a kindness. I should have seen it coming. The whispers, the reorganizations, the sudden exclusion from the quarterly innovation panels. But I kept showing up. That's the thing about loyalty. It doesn't always come with antennae. So when the CEO, Greg Saunders, asked me to step into his office, I didn't expect to walk out unemployed. He gestured toward the leather chair across from his desk, leaned back like he was about to offer me a fishing story, and smiled. That politician's smile, the kind that's all surface and zero soul. Dan, you've done remarkable work for this company, truly. You've helped shape the culture here, but we're pivoting. We need new energy, a different mindset. I didn't speak. I let him talk. It's amazing how much a man will reveal when he thinks you're already dead in the water. We're bringing in a digital transformation strategist, Marcus Chen, fresh out of Stanford, big following online. He's got an incredible grasp on vertical storytelling and user funnel ecosystems. A real visionary. I stared at the bookshelf behind him, a row of unread business books with titles like Disrupt Yourself and The Death of Slow. I felt like an exhibit in a museum no one visited anymore. I'm not firing you, Greg continued. We just think it's time for you to enjoy some well-earned rest. Legacy positions like yours, well, they're hard to quantify in the new structure. I took off my badge. My fingers were steady. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Greg was a man who practiced the word legacy in the mirror, trying to make it sound noble instead of disposable. I stood, reached across the desk, and shook his hand. His grip was limp, like he was relieved it hadn't turned into a fight. I walked out without a sound. No one met my eyes in the hallway. The same people I'd mentored, defended, pulled strings for when budgets tightened or mistakes got too loud. Heads down, phones out, no final words, not even a nod. I passed the marketing team's glass-walled fishbowl, where 2 years ago they'd celebrated my project landing, Fortune's top 10 resilient brands. Now they barely looked up. I got into the elevator, hit the ground floor, and stepped out into the lobby. Reception didn't glance at me. Security didn't say goodbye. I walked out under Halcyon's glowing steel logo without leaving a mark. It didn't hurt until I reached the parking garage. That's when the silence hit. Not just outside, but inside. The absence of purpose echoes louder than betrayal. My keys felt too heavy in my hand. My car, too small. I sat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how I used to feel driving home after a win. Now, there was no win, just exit. The drive was a blur. Streetlights streaked past the windshield like ghosts. I didn't play the radio, didn't call anyone. What would I say? That I was thanked for my service like a retired janitor? That a kid who still wore sneakers to meetings had replaced me because he could say authenticity without blinking? When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. Just walked straight to the kitchen, pulled out the Glenfiddich 18 I'd been saving, and poured 2 fingers into a heavy-bottom glass. Then, I sat at the dining room table, opened the leather-bound notebook my wife gave me last Christmas, and wrote the date in the top corner. Then I wrote one line, Phase 2 begins now. It wasn't rage that made me write it. It was clarity. Rage fades. This was something colder, sharper. I knew what they thought, that I'd go quietly into some lakeside cabin and whittle boats until my pension ran out. They'd forgotten what I was before I became their fixture, before Greg ever shook my hand. I took another sip of scotch, leaned back, and closed my eyes. They called me obsolete. They're going to learn that you don't bury someone like me. You just give him time to remember who he is. I wake up before the sun now, not because I have to, but because I don't know what else to do with myself. The first week after Halcyon, I kept my routine, still set the alarm for 5:30, still shaved, ironed a shirt, made black coffee in the French press like it mattered. I even sat at my desk in the den, opening my laptop like I had meetings to attend. There were none. just email notifications about webinars I didn't sign up for, and LinkedIn requests from recruiters who didn't know I'd been pushed out under a silk glove. By week 2, I started gardening, planted tomatoes, bought soil and gloves and everything. I'd never had time for it before, and now I had nothing but. The neighbor, an old guy named Henry, gave me a nod of approval over the fence. "Nothing like getting your hands in the dirt," he said. I smiled and nodded, but every time I scooped earth, I felt like I was burying parts of myself, like I was digging a grave for something I wasn't ready to let go of. Books followed. I reread The Art of War and The Innovator's Dilemma, then a novel my wife had left on the nightstand months ago. Couldn't finish it. The characters meandered too much. No spine, no fight. Some mornings, I'd just sit on the porch and drink coffee until it was cold, watching delivery trucks go by, wondering if any of them were headed to Halcyon's new headquarters downtown, the sleek glass tower with the rooftop drone pad and smoothie bar, the building I'd pitched for during a budget war 6 years ago. It wasn't supposed to be their palace. It was supposed to be a signal that we were still in the game. By week 4, curiosity started to bloom, not the healthy kind, the cold, surgical kind. I created a dummy LinkedIn account and followed Halcyon's page. I saw press releases, big ones, about their new initiative, Project Rise, a bold, consumer-facing suite of AI solutions to streamline multi-platform productivity. That's what the copy said. But I recognized the bones of it, the framework, the 3-tiered architecture, even the name, Rise. It was the internal code name I'd proposed for our now-shelved Symmetry initiative back in Q3 last year. Budget cuts forced us to table it, but I'd kept every spec, every whiteboard photo, every internal memo. I flipped through my leather-bound notebook and found the original notes. Line for line, the structure matched. No attribution, no footnote, not even a passing mention in the digital press brief. I felt my hands curl into fists, not from the theft, from the sheer ignorance. They had no idea what they were using. My strategy depended on foundational elements they didn't understand. Cost phasing, timing dependencies, partner syncs. Like handing a child a loaded weapon and calling it a toy. I called Ryan Mendoza, former director of ops, let go 3 weeks after me. We'd shared war stories over whiskey once or twice. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Dan," he said, "didn't expect to hear from you." "I've been watching," I said. "You see what they're doing with Rise?" Ryan snorted. "More like what they're trying to do. It's a mess. No workflows, morale's in the toilet, and Marcus is throwing jargon at every fire like it's water. People are jumping ship." That hit me harder than I expected. Not joy, just confirmation. The gut punch of being right when you wish you weren't. "They didn't just cut you, Dan," Ryan added. "They cleared the whole bench. Anyone over 50, gone. No farewell emails, no exit interviews, just delete." "Outdated software?" I muttered. "What?" "Nothing," I said, staring out at my half-dead tomato plant. "Thanks for the update." I hung up and sat there in silence for a while. My scotch glass from the night before still sat on the table, empty but sticky at the base. I didn't pour another. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked back into the den and pulled up the old Symmetry files. I clicked through them one by one, the mind maps, the system blueprints, the projections and pitfalls we never got to solve. It was all still here, untouched, clean. They took my work and shoved it into the spotlight without reading the fine print. I could feel something crawling back into me, not pride, not anger, something simpler, older, fire, obsolete, they said. But obsolete remembers. Obsolete sees the moves coming before they're made. Obsolete knows where the weak points are, because he built the bones himself. They thought I was done because I stopped speaking. They forgot what happens when someone like me starts listening instead. The plan started over coffee, not some grand moment in a boardroom or the flick of a dramatic switch. Just me and Angela Navarro, ex-VP of product, seated at a cracked table in the back of a cafe near the train station. She'd been cut 2 weeks after me. Her layoff came with an NDA and a fruit basket. She left both on her manager's desk and never looked back. "I saw what they did to Rise," she said, swirling her tea with a bent spoon. "Your bones, Dan, your structure. They just slapped new colors on it and called it theirs." "They don't even understand what they're launching," I replied. Angela leaned forward. Then maybe someone else should. I didn't smile, I nodded. That night, I made 2 calls, one to Kevin Chung, my old data systems lead, who quit the minute they promoted a 24-year-old with a TikTok growth hacking course to head of engineering. The other to Patrice Long, who'd run legal compliance for 8 years before she was told to simplify her role into a younger voice. I didn't pitch them, I just asked, "If I were building something, would you take the call?" Kevin said, "I've been waiting for it." Patrice laughed. "Only if I get to write the first cease and desist." By the end of the week, 5 of us were on an encrypted Slack channel with no logo, no name, no promises, just outlines, architecture, and purpose. We called the shared folder Workshop because that's what it felt like, something built by hands, not brands. We didn't want noise. We wanted precision. The blueprint I had created for Symmetry, what Halcyon had now branded as Rise, was brilliant not because of its flash, but its balance. It wasn't a gamble. It was an orchestration. AI-augmented productivity modules with adaptive learning built for SMEs. What they stripped away in favor of shiny dashboards was the soul, the timing, the cultural nuance, the actual usability. Angela restructured the interface with Kevin, removing bloat and replacing it with sleek, responsive nodes. I focused on refining the implementation flow. Patrice combed through every line of IP, every archive strategy doc, making sure nothing we used bore Halcyon's stamp, not even in its shadows. The law was clear. If an idea was unpatented, untrademarked, and unreleased, it wasn't theirs to begin with. I hadn't signed a non-compete. They'd assumed I was done. Their mistake. We called it Vector in the early stages, just a code name, no branding, no social. We didn't need hype, we needed accuracy. We worked from garages, second bedrooms, public libraries. I rented a tiny co-working space on the edge of the city. No logo on the door, just a number, 211B, and a buzzer that barely worked. But inside, we were alive. I hadn't worn a suit since the day they let me go. I put one on again, not to impress anyone, but to remember, the fabric still held its weight. So did I. Every day I stepped into that room and became something I hadn't been in years. Not just a strategist, a builder, a leader. No reports to file, no PowerPoint theater, just progress. And slowly, momentum began to hum under our feet. We didn't tell anyone outside the circle, no friends, no spouses, not yet. Our goal wasn't to stir buzz, it was to show them how quiet excellence could look. Angela's cousin built us a temporary interface demo. Kevin set up a secure cloud server with a latency rate half that of Rise's. I watched Halcyon's LinkedIn page like a hawk. Their updates became increasingly vague, then defensive. "Stay tuned," they posted. "Big upgrades coming soon." Translation, cracks in the ceiling. But the real signal came in a message from an old friend still inside. "Clients are confused. Sales is spinning. Greg's pretending everything's on schedule, but no one knows what the product actually does anymore." We were close to beta, so we planned our entry with surgical intent. No founder interviews, no tech conference debut. Just a limited rollout to 6 small businesses through trusted contacts. No flash, just performance. 3 days in, they started emailing us with questions, not complaints, praise, requests for features. They understood what we'd built. Then something strange happened. One of them posted a screenshot of the dashboard on Twitter, didn't tag us, just wrote, "Finally, a platform that works the way we do." It went mildly viral, 1,500 likes, a few thousand retweets, nothing explosive, just enough for people in our industry to start whispering. And that's all we wanted, not a bang, a current. I sat alone that night in the co-working space, watching the numbers tick up on our tiny analytics board. I didn't feel triumph, I felt awake. Halcyon had tried to erase the past, but they forgot one thing. The past remembers, and it builds. The first headline hit on a Tuesday morning. "Is this the platform Halcyon should have built?" It was a quiet ripple, buried on page 3 of a mid-tier industry blog. But ripples have a way of becoming waves, especially when people are hungry for something real. By Friday, we weren't just a whisper, we were a murmur. 6 more blogs picked us up. Product reviewers on Twitter started asking where Vector came from, why it works so cleanly, and, most importantly, why Halcyon's version felt like a muddled clone. A few even speculated we were an internal skunkworks team that defected. I didn't correct them. Inside our Slack channel, the notifications buzzed constantly. Kevin posted screenshots of glowing user feedback. Angela pushed another round of UI tweaks based on real-time testing. Patrice ran a back-end check on EAP hygiene, just in case, and came back clean. We still hadn't revealed our names. No founder page, no press deck, just results. Every business that tried us stayed. They didn't ask for pricing tiers. They asked when they could expand their seats. And Halcyon? They started to bleed. I watched it unfold with a strange kind of detachment. Like watching a house you once lived in catch fire. You don't rush in. You just hope the neighbors remember who built the foundation before the new owner lit the match. Their messaging changed first. Fast, desperate shifts in tone. One day it was disruption through synergy. The next it was, we're here to listen. Their homepage rotated between a dozen taglines in 3 weeks. None of them stuck. It was like watching a man drown in his own pitch deck. Then came the interviews. Marcus Chen, the boy wonder, went on a startup podcast to reclaim the narrative. But when pressed on functionality, he rambled for 7 minutes about customer elasticity and brand-forward heuristics. Not one mention of actual performance. The comments section tore him apart. Still, I said nothing. Until the think piece. I wrote it in one sitting. It poured out of me. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. When experience gets erased, the cost of discarding wisdom in the age of hype. I didn't name Halcyon. I didn't have to. I spoke in patterns, in truths. I wrote about how companies chase innovation like it's a youth serum, forgetting that structure, foresight, and resilience don't come from followers. They come from scars, from failure weathered, from time served. I published it under the pseudonym J.D. Vellum, a name my father used when writing editorials back in the 80s. Quiet, sharp, anonymous. Let the word speak louder than the man. The piece exploded. Within 48 hours, it hit 60,000 shares. CEOs reposted it. Angel investors quoted it. Ex-Halcyon staff sent it to each other with the subject line, "Sound familiar?" The timing was surgical, strategic, and not accidental. My inbox, which had been dead for months, came alive like a Christmas tree. Old colleagues reached out. Clients I hadn't spoken to in years. Even a few reporters. All asking the same thing in different ways. Are you behind this? I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. Then Greg called. The name popped up on my phone like a ghost. For a moment, I just stared at it. Let it ring twice. Then answered. Dan, he said, voice tight but rehearsed. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. No worse than usual, I replied. He chuckled awkwardly. Listen, I've been watching the market. There's a lot of movement. I think we could benefit from your insight, not officially, of course, just a consulting role, short-term, flexible. You want help stabilizing your ship. A pause. We value your experience. Always have. I let the silence sit. Let him feel the weight of what he discarded. I'll think about it, I said. And I meant it. I would think about it. I'd think about how they replaced me with noise. I'd think about the colleagues they ghosted. I'd think about how they lifted my blueprint without even understanding its foundation. And I'd think about whether it was even worth the gas money to walk into that building again. After I hung up, I turned back to the screen. Vector's dashboard showed steady growth. Retention at 97%. Beta invite requests doubling every 3 days. And not a single cent spent on ads. Just product. Just trust. Angela pinged me. You hear from the mothership? Yeah, I typed. They want a lifeline. You gonna throw one? Number? I already built something better. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. They wanted me to save them from the fire they started, but I wasn't their extinguisher anymore. I was the storm they thought they could outrun. The air smelled exactly the same. That faint blend of too strong coffee, synthetic carpet, and cold ambition. Halcyon's lobby hadn't changed. Same stone pillars, same backlit mission statement etched in steel. Innovate. Disrupt. Lead. I used to believe in that. I used to help write the words behind it. Now, I stood under them as a visitor. 3 months had passed since Vector's beta launch. 6 weeks since the think piece detonated. Halcyon had spiraled faster than I expected. Marcus Chen resigned after a disastrous panel appearance where he froze when asked to explain his product's core functionality. The clip went viral. Someone set it to circus music. Last I heard, he was taking time to realign his vision. Greg Saunders held on longer. Old hands usually do. But investors don't care about legacy when numbers slump. They care about projections, retention, deliverables. And the only company delivering was mine. Not publicly, of course. My name was still nowhere near the Vector brand. But a few of my partners had made quiet moves, strategic acquisitions, silent capital placements. I wasn't interested in running Halcyon. I just wanted a seat at the table, a reminder to the people who erased me that I was never gone, only underestimated. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. I arrived 10 minutes early, not to make a point. Just a habit. Old instincts die harder than pride. Security glanced at my ID, hesitated for half a second, then buzzed me through. The elevator ride to the 28th floor felt surreal. This was the same shaft I'd once used daily. Now I moved through it like a ghost, returned to haunt its architects. The conference room was half full when I entered. Cold air, colder stares. Most people didn't recognize me. The ones who did whispered. A few exchanged nervous glances. I took my seat in the back, watched the clock tick forward, and waited. At 10:03, Greg walked in. His suit was sharper than usual, but his face was tired. Corporate charisma only carries you so far when the tide shifts. He opened with market figures, loss mitigation plans, a few feeble jabs at external disruption. I sat still, hands folded. Then the chair of the board stood. A woman named Lydia Kim, razor sharp, quietly feared. She didn't waste words. "Greg," she said, "we appreciate your service. But the board agrees it's time for a change in leadership, effective immediately. No gasps, just silence. A clean, surgical strike." Greg nodded, almost with relief, and gathered his notes. I watched him walk out the same way I once did. Only this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Lydia turned to the room. "Our investors are shifting capital. The technology they're backing is outperforming across all sectors. We're in discussions with the stakeholders behind that solution." She looked at me when she said it, briefly but clearly. After the meeting, she approached. "You engineered this quietly," she said. "No," I replied. "I just gave them a choice. They made it." She nodded once. "You interested in more?" "I already have what I want." The strategic stake had gone through 2 days prior. Patrice handled it flawlessly. Angela reviewed the product roadmap with a new cohort of engineers. Kevin rebuilt the back end with an AI layer Halcyon wouldn't be able to match for at least 2 years. We didn't need to take Halcyon down. That was never the point. We needed to prove they were wrong. That afternoon, I was invited to say a few words to the leadership team. I kept it short. "You replaced experience with noise," I said, calm, even. "Noise fades, experience adapts." No applause. Just the kind of silence that comes when truth lands with weight. On the way out, I passed the executive floor one last time. The glass walls, the sleek desks, the polished surface of everything. And beneath it all, the same cracks. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button, and didn't look back. Driving home, I passed a billboard. Black background, minimalist font. A single word, Vector. No slogan. No photo. No name attached. Just progress. Silent, unignorable progress. I pulled over for a moment, watched the cars go by, watched the wind move through the trees behind it. Then I smiled. Not because I won, but because I was never obsolete. I was the blueprint they tried to erase, and now I had drawn something better.